shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com.
Welcome to tonight's broadcast. This will be a little different than normal in that, other than my initial comment, I will refrain from commenting on the pieces. I do this for one simple reason, and that is because we're in Canada and I'm not protected by the First Amendment here. And the subject of tonight's broadcast has not hesitated in the past to sue people and organisations in Canada and force them to print retractions. So, with that in mind, I merely introduce the pieces for the broadcast this evening and let you, the listener, make your minds up. I obviously have an opinion which unfortunately cannot be expressed here with the fear of a potential prosecution. I merely paint the picture, and it's up to you, the listener, to make of it what you will. There will be many links on my webpage drawing out more information for you, and if you're listening in the US, you should count yourself very fortunate that you're able to express yourself freely. So now I will reveal tonight's show's topic, and it's all about George Soros. So without further delay, on with tonight's show. This is a short piece from Vince Vencini, and it's in the Atlantic. It's actually from the Atlantic, but I'm quoting from the Business Insider, and you'll see the link on the page. And the title is The Real Story of How George Soros Shorted the Pound, Etching His Name into Financial History Forever. And it goes like this. George Soros is a man who needs no introduction. The famous investor has been through enough bull and bear markets to teach any young whippersnapper a thing or two about how to properly invest. But without doubt, Soros's most famous trade is shorting the British pound back in 1992. The upcoming book, More Money Than Gold, written by Sebastian Malbry, tells a tale of how Soros used his quantum fund to break the pound to pieces and pocket billions of dollars. This is in the Atlantic, and and the Atlantic has a printed excerpt from the novel which has some interesting notes, and they are as follows. The Bank of England's plan to aggressively buy the pound in hope that it will inspire confidence and stop speculators from destroying the currency. Germany's central bank began to attack Britain for calling for the devaluation of the pound. Soros had at least $1.5 billion bet on the pound since 1992. The devaluation crisis occurred a month later in September. Instead of steadily building up a position in 1992, Soros told his lieutenants to go for the jugular. Investor Lewis Moore Bacon worked with Soros to find ways to dump the pound. Britain had to raise interest rates to protect the pound. Prime Minister John Major refused to authorise the hike. Ultimately, he capitulated, the killer moment. When Soros found out just how badly his shorting sell-off had affected the Bank of England, the quote is, "I've learned we've just raised interests by 200 basis points. he said softly. A full 2 percentage points. Then he rose, shook Schmick's hand and left the room, running. The full piece can be found in The Atlantic. And we'll be back after this.
Have you ever seen so much furniture? It's for the Schreiber sale at Williams. Where else? And it means lower than ever prices and immediate delivery. Yes, behind your local Williams is the largest stock in the country of this fabulous range of Schreiber bedroom furniture, now at sale prices. This wardrobe is now only £59.50. This 5-drawer chest, $29.50. And this whole beautiful fitment, just $129. So, for sale prices and immediate delivery, get Schreiber Maryland furniture from your nearest branch of Williams. Where else?
In 1899, Charles Cheers Wakefield started an oil company. In 1909, he called his oils Castrol. Airmen, racing motorists, won on Castrol. Castrol was at the heart of British motoring. Castrol always kept the pressure up with improvements, developments. The latest, Castrol GTX. Quality in an oil is no overnight affair.
This Allegro is the best foreign car I've ever owned.
It's got to hold 5 people in comfort, mind, and do 0 to 60 in about 9 seconds.
Well, even they got to wash the petrol, haven't they?
And I want a 5-speed gearbox, adjustable steering wheel, not as extras. And I must be able to lock all the doors at the flick of a switch.
Slow down, Ethel, there's to fire.
And 5 doors and reclining seats. Can't help me, of course, can you? The new Rover 3500, sir.
Leyland Cars. Austin, MG, Triumph, Mini, Jaguar, Daimler, Princess, Morris, Rover. All with super cover. Great cars and a great deal more.
There we are, Mrs. B. Neptune. Well, cats are like us, aren't they? They need their bit of fish, too.
Oh, yes. He loves his Neptune. You should see him. He can't wait.
Well, it is from Whiskers.
Yes, and it's got those real fish pieces. Neptune really looks delicious. And my Sammy thinks so, too. He never leaves any.
Well, it's like I say, Mrs. B. That's Whiskers for you. Whiskers Neptune. Gives your cat the fish he wants, the way he likes it.
This next piece is from Newsmax, and it's entitled George Soros, 6 Biggest Controversies, and it's by Alessandro Della Valle, and it was April 16th, 2015. And it goes like this. George Soros's unique style in investing and speculating has made him and his clients billions of dollars. It enabled him to put aside his financial management activities for social and political issues that concerned him. Considered one of the richest people in the world, with a net worth of some $20 billion, Soros began his concentration on issues that were philanthropic but also focused on left-wing causes that were controversial. Here are 6 of the biggest controversies, and this is what the good gentleman says. Number 1. As a provocative investor, Soros took a huge risk, some $10 billion, on the currency speculation shorting the British pound, as I've said previously. The pound trade earned him $1 billion, but he was later called the man who broke the Bank of England, according to Investopia. That's a magazine or something, I don't know. Number 2. Soros bet against the Thailand currency, which critics say helped cause the Asian financial crisis in 1997. Number 3. His political views have influenced his contributions. Soros established his Open Society Foundations in 1984 to advance, among other things, public health, education, business development in regions throughout the world, but his views on opposing the war on drugs and criticising Israel, the Israel lobby, have led to financial support of controversial projects. Number 4. Soros's Open Society Foundations have donated millions of dollars in funds to pro-net neutrality groups, according to Media Research Center report. Critics claim George Soros helped help fund and have ties to the Obama White House and regulatory agencies that threaten to impose rules and regulations on private use of the internet, according to the Washington Examiner. Number 5. Soros's financial support of groups such as the ACLU, Human Rights Watch, have helped promote Soros's contention that the US opposes the rights of people here and abroad, according to the Discovery Networks. Soros's Open Society Institute provided the ACLU with more than $8 million of contributions between 1999 and 2008. Discover the Networks maintains that the ACLU and Human Rights Watch groups have interfered with America's war on terrorism. The groups often blame America for the rise of terrorism around the world because of its alleged denial of global fundamental rights. Contributions from Soros pro-Democratic Party organisations help fund shadow networks that support left-wing groups. Number 6. Soros has a God complex, according to critics who say this affects his ideas and donations. A long-time friend once said Soros thought he was anointed by God to solve insoluble problems. This is a quote from Discover the Networks reported. All this information and more can be found at newsmax.com, and the link will be put on my website at the end. And we'll be back after this. This next piece is entitled Top 10 Reasons George Soros is Dangerous, and it's by Human Rights, and there'll be a link on the webpage afterwards. And it goes like this. Human Events readers in an online poll recently voted billionaire financier George Soros the single most destructive leftist demagogue in the country. Here are the top 10 reasons George Soros is dangerous. And I am just quoting. Number 1. Gives billions to left-wing causes. Soros started the Open Society Institute in 1993 as a way to spread his wealth to progressive causes. Using the Open Society as a conduit, Soros has given more than $7 billion to a who's who of left-wing groups. This partial list of recipients of Soros's money says it all. Acorn, Apollo Alliance, National Council of La Raza, Tides Foundation, Huffington Post, Southern Poverty Law Center, Sojourners, so that's SoujouRners, People for the American Way, Planned Parenthood, and the National Organization of Women. Number 2. Influence on US elections. Soros once said that removing President George W. Bush from office in 2004 was the central focus of my life. That's a quote from him. He put his money where his mouth was by giving $23.58 million to various 527 groups. That's a tax status dedicated for defeating Bush. His early financial support helped jumpstart Barack Obama's political career. Soros hosted a 2004 fundraiser for Obama when he was running for the Illinois Senate and gave him the maximum allowed contribution within hours of Obama's announcement that he was running for the president. Number 3. Wants to curtail American sovereignty. Soros would like nothing better than for America to become subservient to international bodies. He wants more power for groups such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, even while saying the US role in the IMF should be downsized. In 1998 he wrote, Insofar as there are collective interests that transcend state boundaries, the sovereignty of states must be subordinated to international law and international institutions. Number 4. Media Matters. Soros is the financial backer of Media Matters for America, a progressive media watchdog group that hyperventilates over any conservative view that makes it into the mainstream media. Now its founder, David Brock, has openly declared war on Fox News, telling Politico that the group was mounting a guerrilla warfare and sabotage against the cable news channel and would try to disrupt the commercial interests of the owner, Rupert Murdoch, an odd mission for a 501c3 tax-exempt education foundation that was barred from participating in partisan political activity. Number 5. MoveOn.org. Soros has been a major funder of MoveOn.org, a progressive advocacy group and political action committee that raises millions for liberal candidates. This is the group that had on its website an ad comparing President George W. Bush to Adolf Hitler and ran the infamous General Petraeus ad in the New York Times, disparaging the integrity of David Petraeus. Number 6. Center for American Progress, headed by John Podesta, White House Chief of Staff under President Clinton. The Center for American Progress has been instrumental in providing progressive talking points, policy positions for the Obama administration. There's also been a revolving door between the White House and the Soros-funded think tank, with Obama staffing his administration with many CAP, that's Canadian Centre for American Progress, officials. Number 7. Yes. Former Obama Green Czar Van Jones and leftist environmental ideals have been funded by Soros' money at these groups: the Ella Baker Center, Green for All, the Center for American Progress, the Apollo Alliance, which was instrumental in getting $110 billion in green initiatives included in Obama's stimulus package. Soros also funded climate policy initiative to address global warming and gave Friends of the Earth money to integrate a climate equality perspective in the presidential transition. Number 8. America Coming Together. Soros gave nearly $20 million to this 527 group with the express purpose of defeating President Bush. A massive get-out-the-vote effort acts door-to-door canvassing teams included numerous felons. Its voter registration drives were riddled with fraud, and it handed out incendiary flyers, made misleading taped phone calls to voters. ACT was fined $775,000 by the Federal Election Commission for violations of various federal campaign finance laws. Number 9. Currency manipulation. A large part of Soros' multi-billion-dollar fortune has come from manipulating currencies. During 1997 Asian financial crisis, Malaysian Prime Minister, I don't know what his name is, I can't pronounce it, accused him of bringing down the nation's currency through his trading activities. And in Thailand, he is called an economic war criminal. Known as the man who broke the Bank of England, Soros initiated the British financial crisis by dumping $10 billion sterling, forcing the devaluation of the currency and gaining $1 billion profit. Number 10. Delusions. Soros has repeatedly said he sees himself as a messianic figure. Who but megalomaniac would make these comments? I admit that I have always harboured an exaggerated view of my self-importance. To put it bluntly, I fancied myself as a kind of god, unquote. Quote, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise I might end up in the loony bin, unquote. If only the loony bin were an option. As it is, one of the wealthiest men in the world is using his billions to impose a radical agenda on America. And that's all quotes, and that's all in a document on the Human Events website, which I will put a link at the end of the programme. And we'll be back after this. Okay, this next clip is from presstv.com, and it's a shorter version of a 25-minute video which you can find the link online, and it'll be on my webpage at the end of the program. And we'll be back after this.
Hello and welcome to Money Trail with me, Amir Arafat. Today, George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. New York hedge fund manager George Soros is one of the most politically powerful individuals on Earth. Since the mid-1980s in particular, he has used his immense influence to help reconfigure the political landscapes of several countries around the world, in some cases playing a key role in toppling governments, particularly in Central Asia. As for the US, some analysts claim that Soros today affects American politics and culture more profoundly than any other living person.
I am very much engaged in the political process. I was very much engaged in the rest of the world, particularly in the former Soviet Union. And in the last few years, I've become much more engaged in the United States because I stand for an open society.
Soros had used his extraordinary wealth to bankroll popular movements seeking to undermine governments in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Specifically, Soros had funded the training, organization, and mobilization of many millions of demonstrators who took part in a series of bloodless political revolutions commonly known as Velvet Revolutions or Color Revolutions. Typically, these mobilizations consisted of massive street rallies, sometimes with hundreds of thousands of participants, and carefully coordinated acts of civil disobedience, such as sit-ins and general strikes. Soros helped bankroll Charter 77. This charter and the political movement that grew from it ultimately culminated in the Velvet Revolution that brought down Czechoslovakia's regime in late 1989. Soros' funding played a critical role in promoting other upheavals in the former Soviet bloc as well. Soros boasts that his foundations contributed to regime change in Slovakia in 1998, Croatia in 1999, and Yugoslavia in 2000. Soros also funded Soviet Georgia's Rose Revolution, a movement that forced Georgian President Edward Shevardnadze to resign in November 2003. Soros thereafter would go on to fund the Orange Revolution, a series of protests and political events that took place in Ukraine from late November 2004 to January 2005, ultimately forcing Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych to lose a controversial and hotly contested presidential election. Also in early 2005, Soros helped finance the Tulip Revolution, a massive protest movement that led to the overthrow of President Askar Akayev and his government in the Central Asian Republic of Kyrgyzstan.
George Soros is a part and parcel of the propaganda arm of imperialism around the world, in the sense that wherever you find an opposition movement in any given country of the global south, which is championing basically a regime change agenda in the interests of imperialism, you'd find the George Soros different foundations bankrolling and funding these organizations. So some of the most well-known counter-revolutions, pro-imperialist counter-revolutions in modern history have seen these organizations financed by George Soros Open Society Foundation and other organizations. Also Human Rights Watch, which is funded to the tune of $100 million by George Soros, is again the Human Rights Watch. Without Human Rights Watch, arguably the NATO war on Libya, for example, could not have been conducted so successfully, because Human Rights Watch was promoting a whole bunch of lies to justify the NATO involvement in Libya there. So there are a few examples there.
Much of Soros' influence derives from his over $20 billion of personal fortune, which is further leveraged by at least another $25 billion in investor assets controlled by his firm, Soros Fund Management.
There are those who work and those who make money, but exactly how would you make over $20 billion, becoming the world's 22nd richest man and America's 7th richest man? Well, one way is by perhaps hitting a bank. there's another way. You can break a bank, and that's exactly what George Soros did back in 1992, exactly September 16th, 1992, by breaking the Bank of England.
The money that I made on this particular transaction, the estimate is about $1 billion.
Soros views himself as a missionary with something of a divine mandate to transform the world and its institutions into something better as he sees it. Over the years, Soros has given voice to this sense of grandiosity many times and in a variety of different ways. In his 1987 book, The Alchemy of Finance, for instance, he wrote, "I admit that I've always harbored an exaggerated view of self-importance. To put it bluntly, I fancied myself as some kind of god or an economic reformer like Keynes, or even better, a scientist like Einstein." Expanding on this theme in his 1991 book, Underwriting Democracy, Soros said, "If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, fantasies which I wanted to indulge to the extent that I could afford." In a June 1993 interview with The Independent, Soros, who's an atheist, said he saw himself as some kind of god, the creator of everything. Soros told his biographer Michael Kaufman that his goal was nothing less ambitious than to become the conscience of the world by using his charitable foundations to bankroll organizations and causes that he deems worthwhile.
This next clip is from a YouTube video, The History of George Soros by Scott Williamson, which the link can be found on my website. And basically it's a brief history of George Soros. I've done an edited version of it. It's a longer video than I'm playing. It has excerpts from CBS 60 Minutes and other things, which you will see referenced if you watch the video. And I'll be back after this.
George Soros is a thug who's deployed as an economic hitman for the British Empire. He was trained at the London School of Economics and later picked up by an associate of the Rothschilds. He will then use the funds handed to him to launch financial warfare, stealing billions of dollars, and then, using some of these proceeds, finance programs such as drug legalization, euthanasia, and political cults such as MoveOn.org to destroy a nation's ability to resist imperial rule. But of course, Soros' demented thinking should not solely be attributed to himself, but rather, it was partially generated by his handlers during his formative adolescent years.
These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros' friends and neighbors. You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old, and I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, and one should understand and anticipate events. And when one is threatened, it was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
Yes, that's right, yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt?
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I could be there. None of that?
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one for whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, in a funny way, it's just like the markets. That if I weren't there, of course, I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. And it was whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator. the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
After being psychologically prepared through his collaboration with the Nazis, George Soros naturally traveled to England in 1947 to seek further training at the London School of Economics. There he became the protege of radical positivist Karl Popper, who influenced Soros' latter project, the Open Society Institute, which coincided with Popper's imperial view that empires have the absolute right to launch wars against the so-called uncivilized Third World to establish peace, just as the British East India Company established peace by enforcing their opium trade on China with gunboats.
Now we have a global capitalist system. The power of the states is greatly reduced, which incidentally I applaud. But nevertheless, there isn't an international political process to keep pace with the internationalization of our economy.
Left alone, states do not maintain peace. We need an international organization aimed at keeping peace. In the 19th century, we had a global capitalist system, and it was Great Britain representing the imperial power that maintained stability. Currently, we have no system of peace. In some ways, the 19th century version of the global capitalist system was more stable than the current one. There were imperial powers, Britain foremost among them, that derived enough benefits from being at the center of the global capitalist system to justify dispatching gunboats to faraway places to preserve the peace or collect debts.
To no surprise, after his civilized training in London, Soros was soon to become the Anglo-Dutch oligarchy's most devoted monkey. According to former associates, George Soros was given his startup money to launch the offshore quantum fund NV by none other than Baron Edmund de Rothschild's right-hand man, George Karl Weiss. With funds of this type, Soros would conduct financial warfare through derivatives and currency speculation. His first major mission was plotted on June 2, 1992, when representatives of Soros, along with other Anglo-Dutch financial predators, met on Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's yacht, the Britannia, while in the presence of the Queen herself. The task was to rip apart Europe's financial structure to maintain stable exchange rates, then known as the European Rate Mechanism, and replace it with the Maastricht Treaty, which established the euro as the single European currency.
George Soros's words, I would describe it as controversial in the very least. He doesn't like this gentleman. I can't put it any plainer than that. I have another clip which will make that perfectly clear. But this is one news organisation's views, and there are various people on it. And when I say the name, you'll understand why it's controversial. And we'll be back after this clip. And the clip is from Fox News and The O'Reilly Factor with Bill O'Reilly. And we'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. We have a powerful and important program, so I hope you stay through the whole thing. You won't be sorry. Buying political power. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Factor has been investigating far-left billionaire George Soros, a man who wants to impose a radical left agenda on America. And under the radar, he is making great progress. Soros has set up a complicated political operation designed to do two things: buy influence among some liberal politicians and smear people with whom he disagrees. Now, here's a chart of how Soros and a few other wealthy radicals who help him are funneling money into the political process. Stay with me on this. Most of Soros's political money flows through his Open Society Institute. You see it there on the left, which is almost unlimited funding. Since 2001, according to federal documents, the Open Society Institute has given nearly $20 million to the Tides Foundation, right below that, an astounding amount. Now, Tides, in turn, funnels the money to a variety of radical hatchet men who are all well paid. For example, Tides has donated millions to the vile propaganda outfit Media Matters, which specializes in distorting comments made by politicians, pundits, and media people. Media Matters is an internet site, but directly feeds its propaganda to some mainstream media people, including elements at NBC News, columnists Frank Rich and Paul Krugman at the New York Times, columnist Jonathan Alter at Newsweek, and Bill Moyers at PBS. In fact, as president of the Schumann Center Foundation, Moyers oversaw at least a $500,000 transfer of money to Media Matters. We'll have more on that tomorrow. Now, George Soros is also pouring money into the Center for American Progress, run by former Clinton aide John Podesta, and the Democracy Alliance Group, both of which fund Media Matters as well. So you can see an enormous amount of money this Media Matters has control of. Finally, George Soros has given the radical left organization Move On many, many millions of dollars. This group actively supports liberal politicians like Howard Dean and John Edwards. It also organizes demonstrations promoting left-wing causes. So you can see how powerful this guy Soros has become. He can smear anyone he wants in a variety of ways. His organizations can raise millions for politicians who will do his bidding. Thus, he can demand that politicians running for office do what he tells them to do. If a liberal politician doesn't toe the Soros line, he or she will be denied funding and brutally attacked. Just ask Senator Joseph Lieberman about what Move On and Media Matters did to him. Now, Talking Points has reason to believe John Edwards is taking orders from the Soros group right now, and other Democratic politicians may be as well. The goal of George Soros, Peter Lewis, Susie Tompkins Buell, and other radical financiers is to buy a presidential election. By that I mean find and fund a candidate who will tacitly do what he or she is told to do. In the past, big business has been accused of doing just that. Now it is the likes of George Soros, an extremist who wants open borders, a one-world foreign policy, legalized drugs, euthanasia, and on and on. My book, Culture Warrior, documents the Soros policy and his tax-evading businesses located in Curacao and Bermuda. The really frightening thing about all this is that most Americans have never even heard of George Soros. This is off-the-chart dangerous, but completely legal under the McCain-Feingold Act. In the weeks to come, we'll have more on Soros and his operations, including naming more of the mainstream media that is actively helping him, which includes Rosie O'Donnell. And that is the memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction to our investigation. Joining us now from Atlanta, Phil Kent, author of the book Foundations of Betrayal, How the Liberal Super-Rich Undermine America. And here in the studio, conservative radio talk show host Monica Crowley. Monica, begin with you. Did I leave anything out?
No, I think you were right on. And you know what? This is an incredibly well-oiled, brilliantly orchestrated machine. And as you pointed out, it's also a brilliant way to get around the campaign finance laws in this country. You have one guy in George Soros. You had mentioned big business had been criticized for this stuff before. Here you've got all of this power in the hands of one guy because he's got $1 billion fortune where he can put his money wherever he wants. The problem is twofold. Number one, transparency. This guy's been able to fly under the radar for a long time before you just exposed him because the mainstream media protects him because they're on the same ideological
Okay, and
page.
also because it's a complicated, you see where the money flow goes. Can you put that chart up again? Because it goes through 3 or 4 places before it gets to the intended source.
Exactly, but you know, this is a web, but it's not a particularly tangled web because, as you pointed out in this chart, you can trace it back 2 or 3 organizations away from George Soros. He's not even making an attempt to keep his fingerprints off of this. And the other point too, Bill, is accountability. So you have transparency, okay, which he's trying to obfuscate with this kind of web, but also accountability. So he can finance websites like you mentioned, Media Matters, other organizations that will go out there and smear right-wing politicians, smear right-wing pundits and commentators and so on, and there's no accountability because it's floating out there on the web.
But we live in a thing of freedom of speech. Now, Mr. Kent, you know, you got to admire Soros for coming up with this organization. I mean, you know, he's made billions by doing this in business, by being in Curacao and Bermuda and France, where he was convicted of a felony. And he knows how to do this. He knows how to move the money around and use it to gain influence. And now he set his sights on changing changing the basic fabric of this country.
Well, that's right. George Soros is really the Dr. Evil of the whole world of left-wing foundations. In fact, one of his most chilling quotes a few years ago was that the main obstacle to a stable and just world is the United States. He really hates this country, and he funds these things, as your chart points out, and open borders and even radical Islamic groups that defend suicide bombers. So this guy is all over the map.
I didn't have that on there. Now, what's the radical Islamic group that defends suicide bombers?
The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee Research Institute is a Soros recipient, and they've actually defended suicide bombers. And I've got this in my book, and how he funds La Raza, the race, the open borders advocacy
he funds
group,
La
and
Raza, we know that. Now, what is the intrusion of the mainstream media? Because you have some pretty big names. Bill Moyers. Wednesday night, he's going to take a big shot at the press on PBS. We know he's in bed with Soros. Rosie O'Donnell, not taken seriously, but certainly a platform every day on ABC. New York Times, two of their main columnists, Newsweek magazine, Jonathan Alter, and NBC News, where it's pitiful, but they have commentators that basically take exactly what Soros gives them and spit it out over the airwaves. That's a lot of power, is it not?
It's a lot of power. Soros really does believe wealth controls culture, and he wants to really control the political scene in the United States and the media. And as your chart points out, it's very chilling, the groups that he is funding through the Open Society Institute. You know, the assets alone of this private tax-exempt foundation are over $175 million.
Wow.
And as you point out, he loves the Tides Foundation, a big left-wing tax-exempt foundation.
I didn't know it was that high right now. 175 million tax-free. Now, Monica, if you're like Lieberman and you're a moderate Democrat, Soros could put a big hurt on you fast.
That's right. I mean, I mentioned right-wing commentators, right-wing politicians, but if you are a moderate, responsible Democrat who happens to take a different point of view than George Soros, you are just as much of a target.
Now, we believe that John Edwards has forged some kind of a arrangement with Soros. I can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, but his actions are pretty much dictated by Move On. He's absolutely right in with those people. Have you seen that?
I have heard that reported, Bill, and you know that's the real danger here, is that there are campaign finance laws on the books to prevent exactly this, to prevent a politician from being held in the pocket by a fabulously rich guy like George Soros.
Yeah, I mean, this
but
is
then
off
if you
the chart.
don't, that's right,
Really
and then
is.
if you don't toe the line, you run the risk of being cut off by somebody like this.
Well, and attacked.
And you do not want to court that danger, not if you're running for president.
And they don't stop at you. They'll go for your family. They'll go for anyone. Ms. Kent, I'm going to give you the last word, but are there any Republican or conservative groups that rival sources?
You know, I tell you, the research that I compiled in my book, if you take the top 3 conservative tax-exempt foundations, they're totally dwarfed by Soros and the Radical Ford Foundation. It's probably 15 times more of the assets. Remember, MoveOn.org and Soros spent $5 million alone in anti-Bush ads in 2004. They have got clout.
Yeah, it'll be 4 times, 5 times that much in the 2008 election. Monica, Mr. Kent, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Is from a YouTube video. It's entitled Soros Revelations in His Own Words, and it's a 25-minute video which I've cut down quite considerably. I'm not going to put it all on there. It's got a little clip from an interview with him and Reuters, and then it has an interview with Fox News with Neil Cavuto, and he's interviewing him, and Soros is rebutting some of his comments and makes comments about Bill O'Reilly. Anyway, make of it what you will, and I'll be back after this.
If it's between Obama and Romney, there isn't all that much difference, except for the crowd that they bring with them. Romney would have to take Gingrich or Santorum as a vice president and probably have some pretty extreme candidates for the Supreme Court. So that's the downside.
Even a President Obama and a President Romney, when it comes to questions of taxation, particularly taxation of the so-called 1%, issues like carried interest. Do you see any difference there?
That is the big difference, and that has led my hedge fund community abandon Obama in favor of any Republican, because they don't like to be taxed.
You one of Lenin's useful idiots in the view of your fellow hedge fund billionaires to be making this kind of argument?
Well, I suppose so. I'm a traitor to my class. President Obama has deployed the confidence multiplier and claims to have contained the recession. If there is a double dip, the population will become susceptible to all kinds of fear-mongering and populist demagogy. If President Obama fails, the next administration will be sorely tempted to create diversions from troubles at home, and that could be very dangerous for the world.
I tell you this, there is no disputing how generous you've been with your money. You've given better than $5 billion to a variety of... Here's what I'm asking you, though. All right? Now, your quantum fund is registered actually in Netherlands Antilles. So what I'm curious about is when you advocate that the well-to-do should pay more in taxes. No, I'm just asking, please. Do you see where some would say, wait a minute?
No, let me say two things. First of all, I pay taxes. My fund is in Curaçao. The foreign shareholders don't pay taxes. I pay taxes on my income from that fund. My management company is located here. We pay taxes. So this is a lie that I have seen in print, and I've seen it repeated.
So the other taxes you pay in this country, are they at the 35%?
I would like to discuss policy. You're now falling into the trap of your colleagues in Fox, which shall remain nameless, because I think they are so disreputable, I wouldn't want to mention their names. I respect you. That's why I came here, all right?
I don't think we can be demeaning
so let's not get personal.
What I'm asking you...
Let's talk about policy.
But no, because this is part and parcel of the same story.
Yeah. The whole story. Let your public find out who I really am, what I really stand for. I chose this country as my home, right? And I want this country to be worthy of the principles that have made it great. And now we are losing those principles. We are being misled. We need to correct it.
You mentioned that personalities of this network. You meant Bill O'Reilly.
Of course I meant Bill O'Reilly, but I really consider him disreputable.
Well, you don't like him at all?
No, I think that he uses methods that I find unacceptable. That's why I wouldn't go on his show. I'm happy to be here, but I have to stop you when you get personal.
Well, the reason why I read a lot of books, I loved your book, and I love Bill O'Reilly's book, Culture War, because he made some pretty strong remarks about you, Mr. Soros. He said, Soros is a smart, ruthless ideologue who will stop at nothing to advance the secular progressive offensive. He has no scruples, ethics, or sense of fair play. A lot of nasty things said about you. People who said that your daddy Warbucks a drug legalization. Yes. That was a Democratic former HUD secretary, health secretary. But does that bug you that no matter what good you try to do, people come back and say, Daddy Warbucks with evil intentions?
Look, that is actually what pushes me to stand up. You know, I supported people who stood up for freedom and democracy in countries like the Soviet Union. And when I see that the principles of open society are undermined by people like O'Reilly with his methods, then I feel that I've got to stand up. So the more he insults me, the more I will stand up against it, because he is using a remarkable trick. You know, he comes straight out of George Orwell, who wrote a book, 1984, you know, Newspeak, that you say the opposite of what you mean.
This next piece is a overview, I guess, of one of the organisations that Mr. Soros is involved in, and it's just a brief overview and links to other things, and you can see how it all sort of fits in, and you can make of it what you will, and I'll be back after this. The Center for American Progress. The Center for American Progress was began in 2003 with funding from philanthropist Herbert M. Sandler and Marion O. Sandler. It's a Washington, D.C. based think tank created and led by the President and Chief Officer John D. Podesta, head of Barack Obama's presidential transition team in 2008, and former Chief of Staff of Bill Clinton. 2009, the CAP, that's the Center for American Progress project, emerged as a major communications war room on behalf of Obama's domestic and foreign policy agenda. CAP became a strong advocate for escalation in Afghanistan. Progressive media is run through the Center for American Progress Action Fund, the more political 501c4 arm of COP. It coordinates closely with Common Purpose Project, an effort to create message discipline among pro-Obama organizations with a direct tie to the White House. Supporting an escalating war for Afghanistan. In 2009, Messaging for Obama, CAP, which has emerged as perhaps Washington's most influential idea factory in the age of Obama, is launching a major new war room staffed by nearly a dozen people that will focus on driving the White House message and agenda. According to articles in 2003 New York Times, Podesta's goal to build organization to rethink the very idea of liberalism, the reproduction in mirror image of the conservative think tanks that have dominated the country's political dialogue for a generation. Funding. The Center for American Progress, as a 501c3 organization under the US IRS code, the Institute receives approximately $25 million a year in funding from a variety of sources, including individuals, foundations, and corporations. From 2003 to 2007, the Center received $15 million in grants from 58 foundations. Major individual donations include George Soros, Peter Lewis, Stephen Bing, Herbert W. Sandler. The Center receives undisclosed sums from corporate donors. Walmart is a major funder of CAP, having given at least $500,000 to the organization. Walmart has been a major funder of President Obama's healthcare legislation, which critics contend will disproportionately drive up costs for Walmart's small competitors. And the list goes on and on and on. Welcome back. As I said in my introduction tonight, I am not going to make any comments as I live in a country that does not have what I believe is a human right to free speech. Now, people in this country would disagree with that, but actions speak louder than words as far as I'm concerned. As we now live under what can only be described as a liberal communist dictatorship, I fear that our rights as Canadians are only likely to be eroded further. What I will say is that all the pieces that I have either played or narrated this evening are out there for you to see and hear for now. There will be links on my website in the coming days to these and other items. Having said that, Please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. But the facts are the facts, and the results are the results, and the actions are the actions. And that's the only comment I will make while I'm domiciled in Canada. Sad though that is. Well, that's tonight's show. I hope you found it informative, because some of you may not have known anything about this important person. Only you can dot the I's and cross the T's. As I said, there will be much more on our website, and this is just the tip of the connections, some of which have already been made by Ezra Levent of the Rebel Media, for one. I am just one small outlet, and you should do your own research. You will be amazed of the links that you will find and where they go. That's our show for tonight. I hope you enjoyed our broadcast. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you will find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, Gab, and email. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on the links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all my morning moments on Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio. And please click on the like button. You can find all my podcasts and all my morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab. Please look out for our next broadcast, and if you like what you hear, drop us a line, and if you don't drop us a line, we would be delighted to hear from you either way. Well, all that remains for me to say this evening is thank you for joining us, and until next time, good night and God bless. Good night, everybody. Good night.